Okay. Colonial Revolutionary class. All right. Now, this is a great class because this is a class about, grand thinking. How do we carve up a continent? How do we take control of a continent? What do we do with a continent? How do we, how should we think about a continent? And especially how can this continent, this is one of the weird things. I mean, this continent, there's all this invested energy into how to take North America and change the world with it. Sounds extreme. This is a big class. This is not simply sort of like learning about Ben Franklin. This is, and he was one of them, a big thinker. What does the founding of this continent mean to the rest of the world? And so with the colonial period on into the revolutionary period, we have a lot of thinking about this, a lot of people doing things about this, and we're going to be dealing with this. The Indians are involved too. You got a whole book here on that spirited resistance, and it's prophets, Indian prophets, and there's Indian big thinkers like Pontiac and Tecumseh, and these guys are thinking like, how to create a pan-Indian associations and especially have religious revival among the Indians. So it's a fascinating class. So at least it fascinates me. I've always loved teaching this kind of stuff. Now, first of all, this is Portugal. Okay, we're largely built around ideas that come out of the Christian Western civilization, and Portugal especially plays a big role with. This is the portrait that's usually said to be Prince Henry the Navigator. But here's a guy before Columbus, early 1400s, who thinks of himself in these terms, which are terms which come into North America: crusader, a knight for Christ. This idea of church militant. He sees himself as a missionary. A crusader is a missionary. And an apostle, a sent one. This idea that you've got a divine commission. It's very cocky, very powerful in the sense of these are ideas of the heart as much as they're ideas of the mind. And what makes teaching United States history very interesting to me is that we think of ourselves as a country primarily not about power and money. I know power and money is there, but sex, power, and money are not what drives United States history. What drives United States history is an idea of the heart and the mind, about freedom, about equality, about making the world a better place, and thinking about how the world should be. And this is what our class is the foundations of this. And there's a notion out there now being batted around called Christian America. And certainly, definitely Christian America. I mean, America's founded in these Western civilization Christian ideas amalgamated with all sorts of other things. But we have to think carefully about Christian America. What does this mean, especially for a person, like George Washington or for people who are out there dealing with the Indians, why, with these missionaries. We're going to spend a lot of time with missionaries. There's a lot of missionaries who really form our country. So see that guy there? He's got his sword as a cross. So that's that crusader, missionary, imperialism, cultural imperialism. Here's all these thinkers, and here's this grand visionary, okay? Now, back to Portugal here. Portugal's over here. And one of the big things about Portugal is they don't have a port on the Mediterranean. And so therefore, in this sort of grand plan, of crusaders, is they want to push back the Muslims, right? Push back the Muslims. And Muslims are very hard to convert, very hard to push back. I mean, there's a successful, the Reconquista, which pushes the Muslims out of the Iberian Peninsula. Very important for California history and the Southwest history and Florida's history, because it gives them that spirit that we can do this optimism. We're dealing in our class, Florida and the East. We're not, I have a California class for California. which is in many ways American history on steroids. But the thing is this Spanish optimism that pushes them out. Now the Portuguese are part of this, and the Portuguese then see that the grand strategy is to get to China. Confucianism is more closely aligned with ideas from Christianity, Stoicism and stuff, so that you can convert to China, and then if China and West are both Christian, we can sort of like squeeze Muslims in between. And so there's a grand plan, get to China. China's the mother lode, of course, for economics, but also for this missionary global picture of changing the world. Now, Magellan is the famous one, right? Comes around here, finds the Magellan Straits. This is the wall. They got to get through North America. These Europeans are not, first of all, thinking about, how can we capitalize on America? No, this America is keeping us from getting to China. And because of that Treaty of Tordesillas, Spain is over here in the Philippines, Portugal's over here on the mainland. Okay, they've split this up. And so Magellan gets here, he dies, and because he dies, they fail. He goes around the world as a failure because the goal was to come to the Philippines and go back, okay? Because you had to create a Spanish network. The Indian Ocean is technically the Portuguese. So what you get is Urdaneta. Excuse me. Just like we're racing through history here. But Urdaneta is this. These are the kinds of people who make North American history so interesting. South American, Central American too. An Augustinian scholar, bureaucrat, sailor, navigator. Urdaneta, Augustinian monk, brings all that head and heart Augustinianism, and he dumps and goes around the world once. But then they send him out in his old age. He's my age. He's in his 60s. He gets out to the Philippines and they send him back. And he figures out how to come back. And this is Urdaneta's route, which then creates the galleon trade. And for 300 years, this is the internet. This is what connects the world together. And the goal is to get to China, but you get to the Philippines, and we have, named after Philip II of Spain. He come down, Monterey's an idea here. And because they, don't do this, you create a connection through North America. But then with this, Spain settles things down. And then so other places have to take second best. And that's France and England. And this North America has to be figured out. This is what our class is about. You could consider it a contest. It is a contest. It ends. There's War of Treaty of 1763, a war, French and Indian War that's going to work out the French, and then the Spanish are going to get kicked out of Florida and stuff like that. So it's a contest. We don't want to downplay, but this is not a class about violence. It's not a class about power. It's not a class about economics. I mean, I think that's the most boring thing in the world is to sit around and talk about how people make money. What really makes this such an interesting place is these various European countries with their various missionary idealisms bring in ideas. And we get places like Santa Fe, named after, Holy Faith, Jamestown, that's the James of King James Bible. We'll talk about that's a sort of fiasco. We'll deal with that. Quebec, great thing. And Paraguay we won't talk about, but that's down there, really interesting stuff going on. And then La Paz over here. We're not going to talk about them. That's my California history. La Paz and Baja, the peace. This Pax Hispanica, St. Augustine, Florida, Manila these are all the first cities which are going to coordinate and connect up these ideas and the cities, what I just call cities, they're towns. And this is this grand European, Aristotelian conception of towns, and we're going to talk about this. Towns are where human beings flourish. Towns are where people are free. Frontiersman out wandering alone is not free. In a town, in a family, in a household, that's where people are most free and fulfilled. And so the French, the Spanish, and the English have their different versions of this, but they all are essentially that town cultures. And so we're going to watch these towns grow. So we're not too much of an explorer class, because these missionaries, their goal is to bring people together into fellowship. You know, fellowships for the good. That's the Aristotelian definition of a town, of a city. First sentence of politics is what is a polis? What is a town? It is a fellowship with an eye to the good. It's never about oppression, or at least it shouldn't be. And even money making has to be limited and kept within the boundaries of appropriate, because the goal is to live well. That's Aristotle's politics. That's the Christian Western Civ idea of a town, and it is brought over to North America. So we spend a lot of time with missionaries, but these missionaries, especially in their orientation toward creating towns. All right? Now, back for a second here. Look at this, huh? Rivers are crucial in our class, right? And where's the most important place in America? Where would you want to control the whole continent from? Yes, you'd want to do it from St. Louis. See, St. Louis is right there. And the Indians had done that with Cahokia. And so I've got a video for you to watch, and we'll, about archaeologists in Cahokia. And we're going to talk about the difference of history and archaeology. Watch that video on Cahokia. It's a good one. It's from the 80s, but it's heavily oriented toward these archaeologists talking about what they know and what they don't know, and how they try not to overstate what they know, but they often do overstate what they know. And the thing is we as historians are dealing with a different type of history than archaeology. And so that's a good starting point here. But we want to look at Cahokia, and I'll also talk to you about Teotihuacan, which was down here, these great cities of North America. But they disappear. And by the time the French and the Spanish and the British get here, those cities are not to be, they're not a factor in what's going on. The Indians have a great rise in their cultures, but apparently, around 12, 13, 1400, there's something going on where the Indian control of the continent is coming apart. We will deal primarily with there's a bunch of different names for these sorts of things, and there's all sorts of different tribes. The Indians are not complete, but these are great organizations. These become entities of foreign policy. The French, the British, and the Spanish have to deal with especially the Iroquois here, the Huron up here, and then this is the Creeks, the Cherokee, the Choctaw. What at one point they called this sort of 5 civilized tribes, and we'll talk about that, where they actually adopt constitutional structures. And we end our class with Andrew Jackson becoming famous in the War of 1812, and it's going to be Andrew Jackson, remember, who moves these people out. Okay, and what becomes most important for us is the French get a hold of the whole rich, wealthy middle. And through the St. Lawrence Seaway and coming out the Mississippi, they can control North America. And then you have these pugnacious British that come in. And so a lot of our class is about the pugnacity of these British. And in their pugnacity, we're going to focus on their sort of Cotton Mather's type of pugnacity. We're going to read some Cotton Mather, because scholar, pastor, but super energetic in basically a sort of evangelical way. So we have Jesuits, we have Franciscans, we have these Puritans, we have Quakers, we have, just a fascinating religious mix, all implanting their ideas into North America. And then there is a struggle among them, and then how How do they unify under the Great Awakening? How do they pull together among, coming into the French and Indian War? Huge, massive fight between these guys and this guy. These guys lose. And therefore, then, in the context of Britain's now control of most of what is now North America above Mexico and Florida, the colonists have the opportunity to think, hey, what do we want to do different than Britain? We don't like being the way we're treated by Britain. And then also, especially, that British imperial hope, we're going to change into an American imperial hope. And we have to talk about that. We have to figure that out a little bit. Okay, so it's a fun class. I'm excited about it. This gets us started. Come to the first Zoom and on Monday at 8:30 a.m. and we'll start talking. But this is the big picture of the class.